But the only thing that truly matters is what happens within us. I'm going to share a story today. Once, a disheartened daughter complained to her father that she's fed up of life. One trouble leading to another one, and another trouble leading to yet another one. Now, father listened to the daughter very patiently, and he related to his profession. He was a chef. He related to his profession, and he said, "Okay, daughter, please come to the kitchen." So what did this father do? The daughter was wondering what he's going to do. And what he did was he put 3 pots concurrently, and he put it to boil. To one, he put potatoes. In the second one, he put eggs. And in the third one, he put ground coffee beans. Now, the daughter was wondering what is going to happen once these food items were boiled. The father put it on the plate, and the last one was put on a cup. Then the daughter was wondering. Father said, "Please touch it." The potato was soft. The egg was boiled and it was hard. Then the cup was there, and the father asked her to drink it. The aroma of the coffee brought a smile to her face. And the father said, "Now, look deeper." And she said, "Yes, the potato was soft. The egg was hard, and the coffee was aromatic, and it brought smile to my face. That's all I can think of." The father said, "Did you realize the same adversity was there to potato, to the egg, as well as to the coffee? But what did the coffee do? The coffee brought aroma. It changed the color of the water, and they were all subjected to the same adversity, but how it brought smile to a person." So many a times in our life, we are subjected to these adversities, but how we deal with it is all up to us. So today, we are going to learn about the creative methods in online PBL. And we have the best in the field from Maastricht University. We have Dr. Danielle Vertjen, who is the program director of Masters of Health Professions Education, Maastricht University, Netherlands. She is also the project leader of Problem-Based Learning MOOC project. She is the PhD in Instructional Design from Utrecht University. Now, it is our privilege and honor to welcome her in this webinar. Over to you, Danielle.
Let me unmute my microphone then. Thank you so much for inviting me. I think one of the beautiful things of this situation is that it has brought the world closer together, that I'm with you in Nepal. I've always wanted to be in Nepal, and now I am, even only online. Thank you so much for this invitation. I'm happy to share some of my and our experiences. If during this talk I'm too fast or you don't understand what I'm saying, then please interrupt me, yeah, let me know. The slide that is on the screen now, this is our campus, Maastricht University, where we have different faculties. This is the Faculty of Medicine and Biomedicine and Health Sciences. But I'm not there now. I'm in my bedroom, as you can see, because our university is also closed. Yeah. So why is this not working? There you go. I'm based in the School of Health Professions Education. You've already heard a bit about that. And in the School of Health Professions Education, we do some research on education. We also run some educational programs, like the master program that I'm leading. And we also do projects with partners in SHE Collaborates. So that's just a little bit of information of where I'm from. I'm going to give you a spoiler alert for this presentation, and that is that I think that one size does not fit all. And one of the things that situations like this require from us is that we find the solutions that fit with us. So I can show you some of the solutions that we found, but you will have to find your own solutions as well. When we started doing online education maybe 10 years ago or so, it started to boom. People thought that this was going to change the world. But in reality, online education often looks like this. It's somebody talking on the screen and people listening. In the School of Health Professions Education where I work, we didn't want that, because Maastricht University has been doing problem-based learning for more than 40 years now. It's one of the reasons that we exist, and we wanted to do online as good as we are doing face-to-face. Face-to-face, our problem-based learning is quite traditional. We have small groups, there are authentic problems, and groups of students meet with tutors. Between the sessions they study. So how do we do this online? And I'll give you some examples that we've been doing for many years. We have some master programs that target post-academic students that are working. These master programs are usually part-time, and we have been doing online PBL in these programs for years, because then our students have to travel. And when they're also working at the same time, it's really an advantage if they can study from home. So usually these master programs target students from a distance, but not a long distance. So they can come to the university sometimes, they can meet their teachers maybe once a month or once in 2 months. That really helps if you already know each other. But the rest of the time they study online. They have pre-recorded lectures, and they do PBL sessions online. And maybe you can see the picture here at the bottom is a little bit small, but it works online more or less the same as when the groups of students are face-to-face, because they are used to this format. They are used to this online problem-based learning. That's what they have subscribed for. Another Another example now is that we have been doing online problem-based learning on a much larger scale, also for all our bachelor and master students that are usually on campus. That's a little bit different because the post-academic students are older and they are very motivated. These are young students. Typically students start around age 18. So they're quite young. They're just fresh from secondary school. They're used to teachers telling them what to do, and now they get to university. They have a lot more responsibility, but they also now are forced to go online with their PBL tutors. And they've had to do exams online as well. What we've seen, though, is that these students at this moment are also very motivated because they're at home. They have nothing else to do. They actually want to continue their studies. Yeah. Other examples that we've worked at are a bit different because they're not so much synchronous. We run this master program that I coordinate with students from all over the world. And then we can't always do synchronous PBL sessions because our students live in different time zones. So this is where our creativity gets stretched because we have to think of really different formats where we can have something that is like problem-based learning as much as we can manage, but not with synchronous tutor groups. And my last example maybe was the MOOC that my host already talked about. This was an extreme situation where we wanted to offer a free course on problem-based learning. But because it was free, we didn't have the resources to give all the groups a tutor. So we had a free online course on problem-based learning, but with no tutors, which makes it completely different. What we've seen there, though, is that groups of participants were very, very creative in finding solutions themselves. And maybe that's another spoiler alert. That even when you as a teacher cannot immediately find the solution, maybe your students have all the solutions that you can try out. From these examples, I've distracted some main lessons for us, things that we've learned, things that over the years we think are important for problem-based learning. And I've organized those lessons learned in lessons for people who design the courses, people who tutor the courses, and students who participate in the courses. First of all, though, I would like to say that our experience over the last 10 years has showed many times that online PBL is possible and that it can work equally well as face-to-face PBL tutor sessions under some conditions that I will talk about later. We've done evaluations of online PBL, and we see that the majority of the course leaders, the course organizers, say that they have been able to reach their intended learning outcomes. We've done evaluations with tutors who maybe needed a little bit time to get used to doing online tutoring, but then afterwards say, hey, I was really surprised, but I could take my usual tutor role and it was actually going fine. Many of our tutors were very anxious when they had to go online. For us, that started in April, that we had to move the whole university online. Many people were anxious, but 2 months later, most of the tutors have experienced that it actually works quite okay. Our students are probably even more positive about the synchronous discussions. In synchronous discussions, they meet their fellow students and they can continue with their studies. And they are quite happy to spend a little bit more time and effort on getting all the technology to work, for example. So what are some of our most important lessons? Sorry, I forgot one slide. So there are also disadvantages I should talk about first. I tend to forget those because I'm quite enthusiastic myself, but it is of course true that technology can fail. Technology can fail everywhere in the world. The bandwidth cannot be broad enough, but sometimes people lose connection or the programs don't work. That's a possibility. Another disadvantage of having online PBL is that there's no or very little body language. I have to move my hands here in front of the screen for you to see them. And that takes a little bit of adjusting when you're doing online tutor groups. People really have to take turns. it's a little bit less interactive because usually it's possible for 2 or 3 people to talk even at the same time. Online, that's not possible. So it tends to slow down the interaction a little bit. And it might be more difficult to involve everyone, especially when you have a larger group of people. When I'm talking to a large group or a larger group like this, I miss the fact that I cannot see your faces and I cannot see whether you understand anything I say. It's okay for people who are happy to interact. The risk in online group work is that you lose the people who are in trouble. People who are not managing to be motivated, people who are not very good at social interactions, they might be the first ones to drop out. So that's something to look out for. This lack of body language to an extent is something that we can overcome with a little bit of creativity, and we can work on the technology. But one thing that I have not been able to solve is that working online also means that there's a lack of social contacts. And I'll get back to this later, because if the students do not really meet and they are not able to have a cup of tea or coffee after their group session, that are not able to gossip in the breaks, that is something that is really difficult to replace. Some tips and tricks for those of you who might be course leaders or course organizers or unit leaders, I'm not sure which word you use. When you go to online teaching, my experience is that the work shifts and you have to prepare more. And when the course is running, you might have less work. When you're teaching online, it's important to think more carefully about how to shape your course before it starts. And the first question for me would always be, is there a good reason to go online? At this moment, there is, because we cannot all come to campus. The students have to be at home. If there is a good reason to go online, you will see that everybody is also motivated to go online and doesn't mind having a little bit more patience. Then when you have to go online, you can think and rethink the design of your course. And what we tend to do, what we've learned to do over the years, is that when we teach online, we limit the amount of synchronous contact. It's really hard to have a 4-hour workshop online because it's difficult to be at a screen for 4 hours for anyone. So we have reshaped our workshops maybe into a pre-recorded lecture of half an hour and then an interactive session that is shorter, an hour and a half or something like that. When we teach online, we also look at the group size. We try to make the groups a little bit smaller. When we do PBL on campus, we work with groups of 10 to 12, sometimes even 14 students. That's a lot online. If I teach online, I try to make my groups not larger than maybe 6 to 8, if I can. That's for the tutor groups, no? Obviously, when you are organizing an online course, you have to think about technology and also about tech support. And it can be really helpful. We have experienced that if you teach for the first time online, that there's a second person who can help you solve technical problems. So in this case, when I'm talking to you online, I've asked my host to help me to keep an eye on the chat box to see if you are asking any questions, because I have to get used to looking at my slides and talking online and also having the chat, for example. It can be helpful if somebody else helps is available to help technical problems with students. What we've also done and what we still do is that we train tutors on managing online discussions. And that sounds like a big thing. But this training is more like an extra hour where we discuss with our tutors what the differences are between face-to-face PBL and online PBL, and what they can do to prepare. And I hope that I will have some tips for tutors later on as well. The last thing I would like to say to course leaders is that it's good to be very explicit about what you expect as an outcome, but that it might also be good to allow your colleagues, your tutors, your other teachers and your students some flexibility on how to work. We can spend a lot of time thinking about exactly which tools should be used or which sequence different activities should be done. But sometimes it works better if people can work out for themselves what works for them. Some tips for tutors, maybe. As a tutor, you know that in face-to-face problem-based learning, your role is to guide students. When we go online, somehow we tend to fall back into a more traditional teaching role, and we think that we have to lead and explain a lot more. I think that's a pitfall. I think even online, your role is to guide, and it can work in very much the same way as face-to-face. If the technology works, that's always step one. So it might be a good idea to test the technology before you start. I tend to try out new things, new programs, new technology, even with my husband or with my children, so that I'm sure that when I start up a session, that I know how it works and that it works for me. You can also, as a tutor, read a little bit or think about what online discussions could be like. One thing that becomes even more important when you're online is to discuss with your group of students how the group process goes. Because you have to have more explicit turn taking, you have to maybe make a few extra rules. When I was coaching a group of students 2 weeks ago, they decided that they would use the button in Zoom to raise their hands if they wanted to talk, so that everybody in the group could see who wanted a turn. And they asked the student who was leading the session to give people turns more explicitly. So you can discuss with your group how you want to interact and what rules you want to set. And it's important to regularly evaluate with your group of students how things are going. Are the rules working? Do you want to change them? Is everybody managing to participate? Are you not missing that quiet student that might find it difficult to speak up on a computer screen? And you can think of creative solutions. I have a colleague who always asks silent students to paste their contributions in the chat box. And for some people who have difficulties speaking up, that could be a solution. So I see it as a question about that as well. It's true you can't see the expressions of the quieter and weaker students. So it's important to think about that, and you could ask them questions directly, but it might even be better if other students, other group members are encouraged to involve all the students. And you can think, and maybe the quiet students would like to type their comments in a chat box. I see that somebody's asking also which platforms we are using to conduct online PBL? And that's an interesting question, because actually this is one of the things where we tend to give people the choice. We have used Blackboard Collaborate a lot in the past for online PBL, but at the moment, many tutors are preferring to use Zoom for online PBL. In the MOOC, we use the specific MOOC platform, but we also used Google Hangouts. My personal opinion is that it's good if the university has a facility to do online PBL, but if you are a tutor and you're working with a group of students and you discover that some other platform works better for you, your group, then go for it, I think. I'll go into the practical sessions later on, because that's a difficult, if that's a different subject. We were talking about what tutors can do. I think another important thing that tutors can do is to make sure that there is time for social interaction and for building trust. And we all know that when you do group work, small group work, it's important to build trust. It's important to spend time on forming a group, on norming and storming to really make it a group. Spending some time on social interaction can really help. Making time to ask people how they are, but also maybe make time to ask people, have they tried any new recipes, or what are they doing at home? It's online, it's even more important to make time for this trust to develop. And other than that, I think my experience has been that it's always a good idea to put your students in the lead, especially when you as a tutor are maybe not so used to using a lot of technology. When you ask your students, they might be able to help you with that. When you ask your students to look after the silent group members to make sure that everybody participates, they can help you with that. They're actually quite good at that. They might be better at it than you. It's a humbling experience, but my experience is that students are often able to solve the problems that seem big problems to me. I think there might also be some students in the audience, so this is my bit for students. When you are doing online problem-based learning, I think that's an occasion that you should take the lead. Most of you are used to technology, so make sure it works and help others to get it working. Help your tutors, help your teachers. They can do with a little bit of help in this situation. It's of course important that if you have online problem-based learning sessions, that you prepare, that you do your self-study. When you're in a session, it's a bit similar to what I said before. Take some time to get to know each other if you don't know each other well. Take some time also on discussing how you would like to work together online, and do that regularly. And put effort into maintaining a good atmosphere. It sounds like a soft statement, but even from our research, we have seen that teams, online teams where the atmosphere is good, perform a lot better. And often, in my experience, part of maintaining a good atmosphere is accepting that not everybody has the same contribution. Some people are very good at the technology, some people are not. So what? Then the better people arrange the technology. And some people might be able to contribute a little more in the verbal discussions, and other people find that hard. That's okay, as long as they participate a little bit. Why would it have to be the same for everyone? And so if you help each other and help your tutor, it's actually going to work a lot better. that's my last slide, and it's the same as the one I used before. I really think that there is no one best solution for doing online problem-based learning. I know it can work. I've seen it working in many different situations, but I also have seen that it works best when people use their own creativity to find how it works for them. That concludes the slides that I had prepared. I'd be very happy to discuss any other questions, and I'll start with the question that is still in the chat box there. How did we conduct practical sessions? And that's a tough one, because for some of our practical sessions, we found alternatives. For example, I was supposed to teach a workshop on intercultural communication early April to students, to bachelor students, and we redesigned that into an online discussion. It had to be a little bit different. We couldn't do exactly the same thing, but we had a good discussion on intercultural communication also online. So for some of the practical sessions, that's an option. In the master program, we usually conduct half-day workshops in statistics. As practical session, we replaced those with short video clips on important statistical concepts, some assignments for people to do for students to do at home, and then an online question hour with the teacher where students could ask their remaining questions. So sometimes there's a solution. For other practical sessions, we have had to stop. For our biomedical science students, it was not possible to find alternatives for all their lab sessions. We just couldn't. So they have stopped for 2 months. Our medical students have not been able to practice physical skills, physical examination skills, because there's no way that we can do that online. So the strategy has been, I think, to move as much as we can online so that hopefully we have time in the summer to do some of the activities that we couldn't do. And our situation here in the Netherlands is that our COVID peak was actually in April. Our lockdown started in the middle of March. The peak was end of April and middle of April, and the country is slowly opening up. So by now, some of those practical sessions are allowed again, and the university has chosen to first start up the practical sessions, but to leave all the problem-based learning and all the lectures online for a while so that we can do the practical sessions now in smaller groups on campus with the social distance that we need. And the other teaching is remaining online for a while to make that possible. So I don't know if that answered your question. I'd be happy to talk more. Are there other questions? Or if there aren't questions, maybe it would help to tell me a bit more about the challenges that you face, the things that you think are difficult. So there's a question about inactive students that I hadn't seen yet. In regular regular PBL, some sessions, some students are inactive or are less active. Have we seen differences in online problem-based learning? Maybe yes and no. One thing that we have seen is that our students are now in their dormitories or at home with their parents, and they're often quite bored. So the motivation to participate in sessions is actually, on average, higher. What we have seen is that some people who are not motivated or in trouble just don't show up for the sessions. And I think that's a hard one because slowly we are starting to see studies that show that some of our students are actually suffering from loneliness and even depression. And if they also don't turn up for these online problem-based learning sessions, it's difficult for us to reach them. Besides that, when I have a group of online session of students in an online PBL session, some people talk a lot more than others, just like in face-to-face groups. To an extent, that's okay. But if people really don't just sit there and do not participate, then I think we use the same techniques as we use in face-to-face problem-based learning. So the first step is that the student who is leading the discussion tries to involve them, maybe by directly asking them, so Peter, what do you think about this? Or Fatima, what is your opinion? And if that doesn't help, the tutor might intervene and hint that. What I've done sometimes online, what you cannot do face-to-face, is that I send, as a tutor, I send a private message to a silent student that the other students cannot see. And I ask, hey, what's the matter? Why are you not participating? Would be great to hear your opinion. And I try first, I try to always approach it from the positive side first. So it's always, I think, more productive to say, it would be great to hear your opinion before you start blaming somebody for not participating. But this private messaging can help you online in a way that you couldn't do it face-to-face. I'm scrolling down. How to make your online class more interactive and interesting. It depends a bit on what kind of class you're running. And so a PBL tutor group session has a clear structure that you can follow, and where you can ask students to participate in a discussion. One of the advantages of working online is that it's easier also to maybe look something up on the internet and share your screen and show students a picture of what you are discussing, or to share a whiteboard where people can draw simultaneously. So some of these technical things might help to make it more interactive. We have had sessions where we were actually working simultaneously in the same document to share ideas and to share exactly what we were thinking about a topic that could help. If you're running a large group session online, it's more difficult. You can try something like using polls or short quizzes. That works to an extent, but an online session for a large group like this, or like a big lecture, I try to make that not longer than an hour or an hour and a half, because it's really difficult to get real interaction going. How can we assess the activity of students in tutorless PBL? That's another interesting question. One of my colleagues does quite a lot of tutorless PBL in a regular bachelor program in psychology in our faculty. He does that with third-year bachelor students who know problem-based learning, who have done problem-based learning for 2 years already. So that makes a lot of difference because the students actually know quite well what to do. And what he does then is that, for example, he asks the students to hand in a concept map of their pre-discussion session so that he can check whether they have discussed the right concepts and have come up with more or less the expected study questions. Another option that he uses sometimes is that he has a webcam running and he sits in his office and he actually supervises for 4 problem-based learning groups at the same time, just chipping in now and then to see how the discussion is going and how they are doing. And that also makes it possible for the students then to ask him questions if they as a group cannot find a way forward. And then I'm looking at the next question. The tutor is usually silent when the trigger is served. Kind of discussion is initiated with brainstorming with online students. Oh, the students can possibly ask Google. Yeah, that's an interesting question. Yes, when you're online, students can discuss and they can be using the internet at the same time to find the right answer. I'm not sure that is always a problem to me because the goal of the problem-based learning sessions is that they think about things and come up with their own ideas and with their own solutions. I think good PBL problems are not problems that you can have a very quick and easy, simple, correct solution to. So if the PBL problem is rich enough to allow long discussion, then it's okay if students find part of the solution on the internet. If you're really unhappy and you think the brainstorming is hindered because students are looking up the answers, I can imagine that. Then I think I would simply ask my students to shut down their browser and not look up stuff and tell them that they can look up things later on. It can be difficult and confronting for students to accept that the goal of brainstorming is not to come up with the right answers. The goal of brainstorming is to see what you already know and what you don't know. So it's good to come up with incorrect answers. It's good to come up with things that you don't know yet because that's the goal of brainstorming. So if students are not brainstorming because they are shy, then maybe that is a moment to explain to them again what the goal of brainstorming is. And I explain this quite often to students, also to students who have done PBL for a while. How can students be assessed correctly? That's, yeah, if the internet connection is poor and students drop out and you cannot always see them or cannot always hear them, you cannot, there's no way of really assessing what they are contributing. There are 2 ways to go about that. One is to try to really control students and ask them to set up webcams, to send in their answers, to send in their homework, to go into that route of where you check and check and check. That's an option, but the side effect of that might be that they only do what you ask them to hand in, what you ask them to show. So I think my first preference would be to talk about this with students, and to talk with students about their own responsibility, and to maybe explain to them that if they don't study, then they won't make the exam. And if they don't make the exam, they will not succeed to become the professional that they want to be. Because that's what we're doing. These students that we have, in a few years' time, they're going to be working professionals, and then nobody is going to continuously check on them every hour of the day. So that would be my first try, I think. I'm seeing, how do I know that students have met the objectives of the session in Tutorless PBL? Yeah, that's not always easy. So it can be, sometimes you can ask students to hand in a summary of what they have discussed. If you have a scribe in your group, you could ask your group to hand in a summary of what they have discussed. Another kind of less labor-intensive trick that we sometimes do is that we provide, at the end of the course, we provide a list of concepts that should have been discussed. So when when all the PBL problems have passed and students are preparing for their exams, we give them a list of important concepts of this course so that they can check for themselves whether they understand these concepts. That's a way of giving the responsibility back to your students. If there are things in this list that you haven't discussed that you still don't understand, then you need to study a bit more. I think I've been answering questions, but sometimes the questions appear in the middle of the thread. There's a question about an online PBL seminar at the end of the block. It would be really nice if you could explain to me what you mean with an online PBL seminar, because I'm not exactly sure how you use this.
The question is from Dr. Anju. Would you like to unmute and put it in a video mode and elaborate, Dr. Anju? Dr. Anju has been trained on PBL at your university. 2 weeks summer course. Dr. Anju?
Or if you know, you could explain.
Yes, I will elaborate. At the end of the PBL block, on the last day, what we do is we give seminar topics to students. They work in groups and they present small topics. And the feedback is provided by all the experts, faculty. Dr. Anju is trying to unmute herself. Ashish, please help her to unmute herself. Okay. So that is how we practice at our institute. So her question is how to do it now when we are in a online mode.
I think it's a really nice format to use. I think this is an excellent way to enable your students to show what they've understood in the course. So I think it's a very good idea. If you want to do this, I assume that this is a relatively long session where students present and then the panel reacts. And I can imagine technically, there's no reason that you could not do that session online. It's possible, but it might become very long. And it might be difficult for people to stay attentive and stay motivated for that long. So we have tried for that reason to reshape some of our sessions. And we have, for example, a session where more advanced students present their thesis proposal and get reactions from everyone. We changed that into a format where we ask people to record their presentation beforehand, where we ask the panel of experts and the fellow students to watch those recordings beforehand, so that the only thing that had to happen online was the discussion and the feedback. That can make it shorter and focus the online time on what needs to be interactive. You see the same format in many conferences now, where they ask the presenters to pre-record their presentation, and then it's only the question and answering that they do online.
Thank you very much. Am I audible?
Yes.
Hi, good to meet you.
Hi. Hi. It was really nice listening to you. I was there in Maastricht in 2012, and I did this 2-week course, and it was really nice to hear from you today. Yeah, you already answered my question. Actually, we end PBL block here by conducting seminar where students present the topics divided from into tiny bits, and then with those topics in the seminars, the whole problem block is discussed. So I was wondering how we could do it online, because there will be different presenters around depending on the topic, 5 to 6 presenters, and there will be the teachers as well. So I was wondering how we could conduct this thing in our setup. So
yeah. That's what I was trying to say. You could still do it completely online, but maybe it would get very long, and you would like to find an alternative for that.
Exactly. Maybe they could do their assignments.
Okay. Dr. Anju said something on assignment.
Yes. Maybe they could do. They could still be given these little topics for them, and they could take these topics as their assignments and then present to the teachers later on, rather than sitting in the seminar for a long hour.
Yeah, I think it works. It still works very well if you give a small group of students an assignment and you tell them to find their own ways of doing this together. I'm sure they will find a way to be in contact and work on this as a group. And they will choose the tools that they know best. And then you can either record the presentation or still do it online. Yeah.
I would also like to share our recent experience on the seminar part. This time what we decided, me and I'm the PBL coordinator for dental program, and Dr. Jamal is the deputy coordinator. So he suggested, why not
Good evening, everyone. I'm Dr. Ashish. I'm a member of Health Professional Education Core Group. Sorry, Dr. Josna couldn't continue for some time because of the power cut which is happening again and again. Kind of for that, Madam Daniel. I can see Jamal around, so could you kindly continue with Dr. Josna was trying to highlight? Okay, yes, he's back now.
Okay, otherwise I see that there's also a question at the end of the chat
Yeah.
where it says,
Yes.
usually we have a week time for PBL for one case, I presume. Is it possible to be flexible or to extend or reduce the session online? I think it's really good to rethink questions like that when you are forced to go online, to rethink, should we really stick to the same time schedule? Or is it easier for everyone to be flexible, to extend or shorten a bit? For the online sessions, for this kind of face-to-face online sessions, we have noted that 2 hours is quite long. Usually our sessions, our face-to-face sessions, PBL tutor sessions are 2 hours. We have seen that online that is quite long. So we tend to shorten them to 1.5 hours with our students how to use that time effectively. Or if we have to have very long sessions, we tend to have coffee breaks, because more than 1.5 hours online is quite difficult for people to stay attentive. So we tend to shorten the session, the synchronous sessions a little bit, and that means that they have to do a little bit more studying by themselves. But usually there's enough motivation to do this because people are happy to continue. I don't know if that was the question or if there's anything else you would like to ask about timing. I see Dr. Jyotsna is back as well. Am I pronouncing your name well at all?
It's perfect. Yes. So I'm sorry for this hitch today, the electricity, sometimes internet. But what I was sharing was the students were asked to make posters instead of PowerPoint presentations. So they were asked to make posters, and we also provided them some different applications which they can try it out, like Prezi and things like that. And they explored. They came up with such beautiful posters. Some of them also came up with 3D posters. And we were so amazed to see all those. So I think many a times we underestimate our students. We need to give them that flexibility to explore their potentials. That is how we felt in our recent online PBL.
It's a great idea to ask them to make posters. And I think I share your experience that if you give students more freedom, that you're amazed with what they come up with.
Yes.
So that's definitely something to try.
Because my screen went off, but I'm sure there were some questions which were unanswered. Maybe Dr. Ashish can scroll through and see if there are any questions unanswered. There was something on process assessment.
Yes.
Has that been addressed?
Process assessment, I think you mean whether, do you actually assess participation in tutor groups?
Yes, we do. We use the same of Maastricht University. We use the same model. And we have modified maybe 1 or 2 items contextualized. We have kept some open-ended questions. Apart from that, we have adopted the same process assessment format. And along with that, we also assess the students on their behavior. That is a different questionnaire, which the tutor keeps a log of. And then at the end of the tutorial, at the end of the PBL block, that is handed over to the coordinator, and we sit and analyze it. The progress, especially the progress of the student on the first day and how they have changed their attitude towards the end. So that is what we do. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, and I can imagine that when you're in online sessions, it's more difficult to see the non-verbal participation, the non-verbal signs of whether people are interested. A lot of in general, when the group isn't too large, I think I can still see whether somebody is participating or not. But what I tend to do in online groups especially is that I also discuss this with the whole group to see how is everybody managing to participate and how do we think this group is collaborating? Are we happy with the way that we are discussing? Is this, and we tend to often blame the students who are silent, but sometimes I also especially discuss this with the students who are not silent, because they need to be silent for a while to give other people the opening. So there's a bit of personal preference in this. This is what I like to do anyway, even in a face-to-face session. I have a preference for discussing this with the group of students rather than me as a teacher marking circles on a form and giving them a grade or a mark for this. Online, I think that becomes even more important to discuss with the group, how could we even change? If some people are talking a lot and other people are silent, as a tutor, you can see this and notice this and ask the group to come up with ways to change this. And this is another point, I think, where you could put your students in the lead, because maybe as a tutor, the only thing you have to do is to say to the group, listen, I see that some of you are talking a lot, others are not talking much. I don't know why, but I don't think it's a good interaction. Can you, as a group, think of ways to change that? And my groups of students have come up with very different ways. Some groups then go into a real rotation scheme where they assign roles for students to talk or take turns, very specified. Other groups have chosen to even creatively say, listen, if it's not easy for you to talk in a group, then maybe you can be the one who makes the notes on the shared whiteboard, and then you add your thoughts there. But students can be very inventive also in doing that, and that shifts the focus from assessing and grading to actually helping them to develop. Yeah. I'm trying also.
Any more questions in the Q&A? Because now I don't see it as my login was recent. So do you see any question there unanswered?
I've tried to keep track, but maybe if you have a question that wasn't answered, you can post it again. Because it's not always easy for me to oversee the whole chat box. But if there's anybody in the audience who had a question that I didn't answer, then just please post it again.
Or since we all have time, we can also take some of the questions live.
Yeah.
That's okay. Dr. Ashish, is there any more question which is there in Q&A?
I can see it in the chat room. It's from Dr. Parth Guragai.
Okay.
His question is like, what kind of innovation we can think in resource limited setting for PBL? How can we engage an interest of student tend to wane off after some time in online method?
Yeah. there are two parts in this question for me, because I think in any setting, also in high resource settings, if we do PBL in exactly the same way for 3 or 4 years in a bachelor program, it's difficult for students to remain motivated, even when they are doing this face-to-face. And it's not so strange, because when they are just coming in as first-year students, PBL is maybe is difficult, is challenging, is interesting, maybe sometimes too difficult. But when you've done PBL for a year or 2 years, you get used to doing the steps. And we also see in Maastricht, when we're doing PBL face-to-face, that it tends to become more or less a ritual dance, no? Okay, these are the PBL steps, blah, 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 and it becomes more a ritual than that the brainstorming phase, especially. It's difficult to remain inspired for years. So a solution that we're trying out for that is that we are trying to find different PBL formats for more experienced students, where they take more responsibility. For example, by asking them to do PBL without a tutor, or to change the standard PBL format in a more project-based learning idea, where they work on something larger than 2 problems a week or 1 problem a week. So we're trying. It's part of. So part of this is also in seeing how students progress and how they can become more independent and take more responsibility and do more complicated things when they get more advanced. In online PBL, the extra point of waning motivation might be that people get bored of sitting behind the screen. I think we are also still gaining experience in how to deal with that. But we've had, we're trying out different things there. We've had a second-year student who offered to give yoga lessons online to her fellow students, just to make a change of sitting behind the screen, and that worked great, even more so because it was a student doing this. But if you have to work online and sitting at a computer screen for a long time, I'm not sure I have an immediate answer. Then there's the part of your question that says the resource low setting that you work in. I'm not sure that the waning of interest is related to the low resource setting. I see that the low resource setting brings challenges in terms of the power cuts, where people drop out, or not all the students might have bandwidth. That requires creativity. Creativity where somebody else takes over from Dr. Giosna when the power cuts off, and then you see that one of your colleagues took over, and we continued the discussion, and you dropped in again, and it was not really a problem. It requires a creativity, and we've seen this also here, that there are some families where the children had to have online schooling and they had no computer. So that happens everywhere, and you can try then to make sure everybody has a computer to an extent, but we've even seen that some schools have reached out privately to individual students that were resource challenged, to individual families where they knew that there was no technology or no possibility to have that technology. I've seen my own children also thinking up creative solutions for things that they had in school, where if somebody lost connection, like in one of my kids' classes, the mentor has made little groups of students that are sort of responsible for each other. So if one of them has technical problems, it's the responsibility of their mate, of their peer, to catch up afterwards and give an update of what was discussed in class. So there's, I think, creative ways to deal with this. The same mentor has invited students to come together in the woods nearby, where there's a lot of space where they can have a picnic setting where everybody sits in the grass on their own little towel and they have enough distance and they can still meet. So I think there's a lot of for the low resources, it will require creativity to deal with it, and maybe also to individually reach out to those students who are having most trouble. For the waning motivation, I think the solution is to have some variety in the format that you use, and to make sure that over time, over the years, your students can actually take more responsibility. I'm not sure. That was quite a long answer.
Yes, it was long, but I think it was very clearly explained. And yes, there are challenges, but I think innovations come from challenges. And we are exploring, we are experimenting, and students are with us. That is what I have felt. The students are with us. They also want to bring online education in helping us, especially in the technological aspects. They are also helping us out. So I didn't see any question from the student side. I'm sure there are some students there. It would have been nice to bring their comments or queries here. So if any of the students are around, I would encourage you to put your queries, comments there. Or you can just raise your hand and just express how you felt in this online PBL session. Any of the students are there who recently had PBL or who are having online classes?
Yeah, and if not, I would even like to ask them a question and ask them, what are you missing now? What is it that you most miss in this situation? I see that there is somebody who has raised their hand. Somebody called Abdul.
Yeah, I'm just give me a second.
Saeed. Yeah.
Yeah, Dr. Abdul Saeed. Just give me a second.
Hi, can you hear me?
Dr. Abdul. Yeah.
Yes.
Right. Okay. I'm Dr. Abdul Saeed from Saudi Arabia. I have some link with Maastricht as well, because when my parent university, Aga Khan University, was implementing PBL in 2000, around 2000, I was part of a team, which was sent to Maastricht to get trained. And, I still cherish those memories, Very nice hearing you, Danielle, and what is the name of Dr. Royan Rimal, Dr. Rimal. Okay, so very nice to hear you, and it was very informative. At this stage, when one feels that you have got grasp of everything, all of a sudden something new comes up, and you feel that you don't know anything about this, So this is this coronavirus, has put us in this kind of situation. We finished our our last academic year, in May, the second semester, which was done online. And I was wondering, I put up these two queries, which were lost, I think, somewhere. First query was that while doing the PBL online, I always wonder that the students which I'm seeing or students which I'm seeing on the screen, are they really present there, or they have just logged in and they have gone to sleep again. So this is something which, which I think you very well mentioned that sometimes if somebody is quiet, you can always send a private message, that what you are doing, is everything all right? And I haven't seen your participation at all. So this could be a kind of shake-up, that is what I use, term I use that from time to time. You need to shake up the students, in an online setup, The other thing which came to my mind that you mentioned about psychomotor skills like lab session, which cannot be done online. When we finished the last block, we were thinking, because in this block we could not run any labs. And we were suggesting that with some volunteers, we can record these sessions, lab sessions. And then, whenever the lab session is scheduled, we can show that video to students, So this is one way of dealing with this. I don't know whether anybody else has done it. Possibly you as an expert could tell me about that. But this is something which I think we are going to try in the next block. Thank you very much.
Yeah, I think this is a good idea that you can record sessions. And I think one of the positive side effects of this whole situation is that many teachers feel more, because they have to record sometimes themselves. We are getting more used to recording ourselves. And this is for some lab sessions, even if the students can go to the lab and do it themselves, it might be very beneficial for them to see the video first anyway, because then maybe they will be able to learn faster or better when they can go to the lab, especially for longer lectures, for example. We have been trying to convince lecturers that they might be better off to pre-record shorter video clips about difficult topics and not do 2-hour lectures where students fall asleep also when they are there in the hall. So lecturing is, they're not really listening for 2 hours even when they're in the lecture hall with you, at least very often not. So I think we have now finally managed to convince our statistics teacher in the master program that it makes no sense to lecture 2 hours about statistics, that it's a lot nicer if he just makes short video clips about the different statistic concepts and then some assignments to try that out. And students are actually loving that, and they're liking it more than the half-hour statistics or the half-day statistics workshop that they were doing before. So sometimes it's even beneficial, and we might want to keep small bits of that. For many other things, I'm happy if we can go back face to face.
There is one more comment from head of the Department of Biochemistry Department, Professor Madhav Lamsal. He says, are you able to read the
Yeah, he
Q&A?
says he thinks that online PBL can be conducted by the same tutor to multiple groups. I think that can be true if you have advanced students. If you have advanced students who are used to doing PBL and who have gained the skills to independently do their PBL discussions, I think this is true. I think one tutor can oversee several groups, but it also requires from those students that they reach out to this online teacher at the moment that they need support. So I would not do this with beginning junior students who have not done PBL before. And we were also alluding a bit, I think, before to the motivation to do online PBL. This is a similar thing. In the past, a few years ago, I had a colleague who tried out online PBL with first-year bachelor students because he didn't have enough rooms available to have the tutor groups in the university. But that didn't really work out at all because the bachelor students then thought they were missing out on coming to university. There was no reason, there was no reason for them to work online. They wanted to come to university and meet their students, their fellow students, and have the breaks together. Now, because we all have to be home, the difference is we either have no education or we have online education. And that's a really strong motivation for everybody, also for students, to be active and to work on this and to maybe have the patience and the extra effort to make it work.
If there are no more questions, I have a question. In the MBBS program, we have PBL for basic sciences, but if at all, because now we are also thinking of somehow continuing the education, especially the knowledge-based, through PBL even in the clinical side. So what has been your experience?
We use a lot of PBL-like formats also in the clinical part, and I think it can work out very, very well. Sometimes maybe even better. And our medical students, for example, they do PBL based on paper cases for the first 2 years. At the end of the second year, they have some virtual patients. And in the third year, they actually, they have conversations with patients. So their PBL problem might be on, I don't know, I'm not a doctor myself, but on digestive problems related to stomach ulcers. And then they organize that in groups of 2 or 3, they have a conversation with a patient who suffers from this complaint. And then they come back and have the PBL session and they bring in what they know from those conversations with the patient. So they do an anamnesis with the patient as far as they are able at that moment in their study. And the whole PBL problem that they have their discussion around are those 3 or 4 patients that they've actually talked to. And then they go to the similar process. They have a brainstorm, they have study questions, and they come back and discuss. But the problem that it's based on is these conversations with patients. That makes it even more authentic than it was with the paper cases. And later on, when they are in the clinic and more experienced, we ask them to bring in their own cases. They can take turns and bring in a real patient case, a patient that they've seen in the clinics the week before. And then they can discuss. And that makes it even more authentic. And it's even more motivating because they know that this is a real patient they're talking about.
Are there any more questions? Dr. Jamal?
No, ma'am, there are no questions as such.
Okay, thank you. We don't have Dr. Ojashwi there, right? From our program coordinators, any question? Many of the questions have already been put by our program coordinators. If there are no more, then yes, the time is also almost up. On behalf of Department of Health Professions Education, I thank you for the courage which you have given us on pursuing online PBL in the present context. And I hope and I'm sure you would render your support in the future also. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you so much for reaching out, and I've enjoyed this conversation. If there are more questions later on, then you can also send them to me by email. If you're ever around Maastricht, please drop by and come and talk to us. If I ever have the chance, I'll come and visit you. But for now, I wish you good luck and courage, and maybe just a little bit of patience. And I'm sure that you will notice and you will experience yourself that this online PBL maybe isn't working perfectly, but it can work quite well, and it can help us to continue our development and our students' development in these difficult times. I would love to hear back from you in a few months' time what your experiences are. So I would be really thankful if you could send me just a short message in 2 or 3 months to tell me how it all went and what your experiences were.
Definitely, we will do that. Yes, thank you very much.
Thank you.